Patterns of Fade. Chapter 1. The Man Beneath the Skin. Fluorescent light reflected off the sterile edge of metal instruments. Max Cole, the 39-year-old owner of the Soul's Gamble tattoo parlor, leaned over a client's pale forearm, drawing the final strokes of a raven with outstretched wings. The sound of the machine soothed him, like ritual drums did for ancient shamans. Through patterns on someone else's skin, he spoke to the world, unable to find words for what mattered most, what was happening in his own home. His strong hands with ink-covered fingers, which could spend hours drawing the finest details on yielding skin, seemed useless when it came to his marriage slipping through those same fingers. 10 years of service in a special private military contractor unit, where he covered the backs of politicians and businessmen in hot spots, had taught him to sense danger moments before a shot was fired. But he missed the blow from a direction he didn't expect, from Diana, his 27-year-old wife with midnight blue eyes and a voice as thick as honey. Once that voice had sounded for him, calling, laughing. Now he more often heard it from behind the closed bathroom door, muffled by the noise of water, Diana talking on the phone, thinking he couldn't hear. The light of his salon with its uncovered honesty and directness had become Max's refuge from the half-shadows and unspoken truths of his own home. In the sterile silence of the wide loft with brick walls and huge windows overlooking the ocean bay, Max created what he couldn't get in real life: honesty. Each tattoo was a confession, each drawing a life story that the client entrusted to his hands. Diana once understood this, wore his work on her left shoulder blade herself, a phoenix rising from the ashes. Now the bird seemed frozen under her skin, unable to take flight. Great, we're done for today. Max set aside the machine and carefully examined the result of his work. The raven looked alive, ready to break free from the skin and fly through the open window. The client, a young programmer from Seattle, exhaled in admiration, examining the tattoo in the mirror. "Man, this is just incredible, it looks alive." Max nodded, not sharing the enthusiasm. The raven had indeed turned out well, perhaps too well. A bird with a piercing gaze, seemingly looking into the soul. He didn't want to admit to himself that he had invested his own anxiety in this drawing, colored it with his suspicions, expressed through it the fear constantly gnawing at him from within. After closing the salon and saying goodbye to his assistant Chris, Max glanced at his smartphone display. 8:30. Diana used to ask him to let her know if he was staying late after closing. In recent months, she hadn't even asked. His presence or absence in their penthouse on the waterfront seemed indifferent to her, like everything that connected them except their shared address. When the key turned in the lock of their apartment, Max immediately sensed something strange. The air carried the scent of unfamiliar cologne mixed with expensive cigars, completely out of place in their interior. Diana sat on a white leather sofa, scrolling through social media on her tablet. Not a muscle moved on her chiseled face when he entered, only her fingers slightly tightened around the thin frame of the device. "Hi," Max said, removing his leather jacket. "How was your day?" "Fine." Her voice sounded too even, like an overacting actress. "Did a photo shoot for that new restaurant's account. You know, on Pier Street." "You're lying," thought Max, but aloud he said, "Found them on Instagram, beautiful photos." He went to the kitchen, took a bottle of craft beer that his friend brewed in a small brewery on the outskirts of the city from the refrigerator. In the sterile cleanliness of chrome surfaces, he noticed 2 empty glasses by the sink. One with the imprint of Diana's dark red lipstick, the other with remnants of whiskey at the bottom and smudged fingerprints. "Did you have a guest?" he asked, returning to the living room with the bottle in hand. Diana froze for a moment, then casually shrugged. "Oh, yes. Melanie stopped by to discuss a new project." Max nodded, taking a sip of beer. Melanie, the makeup artist Diana worked with, only wore nude lipstick shades and drank nothing stronger than Prosecco, and certainly didn't smoke cigars. "We need to talk," he said, sitting down across from his wife. Diana looked up from her tablet and regarded him with poorly concealed irritation. About what? Max, I'm tired. The project was difficult, lots of stress. About us, he simply replied. About how we're growing further apart, like parallel lines on a canvas, seemingly close but never intersecting. Starting that again. I told you I have a lot of work. You're constantly in your salon too. Everything's fine with us. He was irritated by this fine, an empty word behind which stood nothing but a desire to close the subject. Once there had been no room for normalcy in their relationship. There was passion, fire, brightness. Now only a faded photograph of the past remained, like an old tattoo whose contours time had blurred. At night he couldn't sleep for a long time, listening to Diana's breathing. She lay at the very edge of the wide bed, facing the wall. The distance between them seemed measurable in light years. Not long ago they fell asleep without breaking their embrace. Now the sensation of another body nearby felt unfamiliar. With some instinct honed over years of work in conflict zones, Max caught the barely noticeable tension emanating from her. Diana wasn't sleeping either. Thinking, planning, or just waiting until he finally fell asleep. The silence was broken by a barely audible sound, the muffled vibration of a phone. Diana, clearly thinking he had finally fallen asleep, carefully reached for the bedside table. In the darkness of the bedroom, a screen flashed and went out. Max glanced sideways and saw his wife's fingers quickly sliding across the touch screen, how she erased and rewrote a message, as if carefully choosing her words. The dim glow of the screen reflected in her eyes, and he noticed something he hadn't seen for a very long time, a living emotion, carefully hidden from him but breaking through in this moment: anticipation. His heart seemed to contract in an invisible fist. He knew that look. 6 years ago, Diana had looked at him the same way when they wrote messages to each other after their first date in a small bar by the pier. Now that look was intended for someone else. The next evening, Max deliberately stayed at the salon longer than usual. The last client, a middle-aged woman who wanted to eternalize her children's names intertwined with a floral ornament on her forearm, left at 8. He was in no hurry to close, methodically putting his workspace in order, changing needles, wiping surfaces, arranging tools. Chris had left an hour ago, and a ringing silence reigned in the room, broken only by the hum of the air conditioner. To hell with it, thought Max, finally locking the salon doors. Time to acknowledge the obvious. It was about 10 o'clock when he silently turned the key in the lock of their apartment. Diana's muted voice came from the living room. She spoke quietly, but her intonation carried an intimacy clearly not meant for a casual interlocutor. "I swear everything will work out perfectly," reached him. "He lives in his world of tattoos and ink, won't even notice." The creak of the parquet under his boot cut the phrase short. When he entered the room, Diana was already sitting with a feigned, indifferent look, scrolling through something on her phone. "Oh, you're home already." Her voice sounded fake, like an out-of-tune guitar. "I was just browsing references for a new shoot." Max looked at her and didn't recognize her. Where was the girl who 6 years ago had captivated him with her sincerity, openness, and energy? Before him sat a beautiful porcelain doll, impeccable and empty. Chapter 2: Silver Threads and Carmine. August was melting on the streets of Laguna Beach, turning the asphalt into a shimmering mirage. The air trembled with heat, and even the ocean breeze, usually refreshing the city, today felt like the warm breath of a sleeping giant. Diana entered the Silver Prism Gallery, escaping from the suffocating heat. The cool air from the air conditioners gently enveloped her skin, bringing blessed relief. She moved unhurriedly between exhibitions of contemporary art, examining avant-garde sculptures and canvases, when she felt someone's intent gaze upon her. Turning around, she saw a tall man with casually styled platinum hair. His piercing gray eyes looked at her with undisguised interest. "What do you see in this painting?" The stranger's voice turned out to be low, with the characteristic hoarseness of a man accustomed to giving orders. Diana looked at the canvas, an explosion of colors, chaotic strokes, behind which one could guess either a storm or a scream. Turmoil, she answered, surprising herself, and freedom. The man slowly smiled. Exactly what I put into this work. You're the first who saw it without lengthy explanations. He extended his hand to her. Adrian Calloway, just Adrian. Diana Cole, she felt her cheeks flush under his studying gaze. Yes, I know. He was in no hurry to release her hand. I saw your work in Apex magazine. Amazing vision of light. It was precisely at the moment when the name Adrian Calloway echoed in her consciousness that Diana realized whom she was talking to. One of the most famous contemporary artists on the West Coast, whose exhibitions ran from New York to Tokyo, whose works were collected by museums and billionaires. And he stood before her now, looking as if she were a rare work of art. At that moment, she didn't even suspect that this chance meeting would turn her entire life upside down. Adrian seemed the embodiment of the artistic world she had always dreamed of. He spoke about light and shadow, about composition, and the emotional impact of art with such passion that an ordinary conversation about photography turned into immersion in another universe. Each of his words was filled with a special power that was so lacking in her familiar life with Max. Their romance began rapidly, like a lightning strike dividing time into before and after. Secret meetings in his huge studio atop a cliff, where glass walls erased the boundary between reality and the infinity of the ocean. Lessons of light, as he called them, when he taught her to see beauty where an ordinary glance noticed only mundanity. He transformed her from a photographer shooting commercial projects into a true artist of light, each of whose frames breathed emotion. I realized long ago that my wife never truly loved art, Adrian would say, stroking her bare shoulder. For Veronica, my paintings have always been just a way to earn money, a status symbol. But you see the soul in every brushstroke. These words resonated in Diana as a sweet echo, filling her vanity with honeyed poison. She nodded, forgetting that she too had long looked at Max's tattoos merely as a commercial product, not noticing in them what others saw, sincerity and depth of story told through skin. I would divorce her in a heartbeat, continued Adrian, kissing Diana's neck, but all the galleries are registered in her name. Family business, you understand. If I file for divorce, she'll ruin me, and I must create art, it's my mission. Diana believed his every word, not wanting to notice in these explanations the same templates used by married men since the beginning of time. After all, can templates exist in the world of true art? That evening Adrian called her, barely containing excitement in his voice. My princess, can you imagine, Veronica is flying to Paris for a whole week. A vernissage at the Louvre. Diana froze, clutching the phone. Veronica Calloway, a cold blonde with impeccable manners, whose photographs adorned society columns. Usually, she accompanied her husband to all significant events. I want to spend this weekend with you, continued Adrian, and his voice sounded like a hypnotic spell. Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Just you and me, no rush, no limitations. I've prepared a special place for us, an art residence in the Santa Monica Mountains. There I'll create a series of works with you in the starring role. Her heart raced with anticipation, but at the same time clenched with panic. 3 days. How to explain such a prolonged absence to Max? He wasn't the type to easily swallow a story about a sudden photo project. He knew the industry too well, felt lies too keenly. And then it hit her. Cassandra, her twin sister, was the only person in the world who could replace her so that even their parents wouldn't notice the substitution. They were identical on the outside, but so different inside. Cassandra, serious, thoughtful, eternally immersed in her paintings and illustrations. She never approved of her sister's lifestyle but always came to help in difficult moments. However, this time the request would be of a completely different level. Diana nervously tapped her fingers on the steering wheel of her red Audi, parked near Cassandra's small house in the suburbs. Gathering her courage turned out to be more difficult than she expected. how to explain to her sister that she needed not just to cover another escapade but to play the role of a wife for 3 whole days. Taking a deep breath, she took out her phone and typed a message. "I'm at your house. I need your help. It's very important." Cassandra listened to her sister in silence, only her fingers, gripping the brush she never put aside, whitened from tension. She looked at the nearly finished canvas on the easel, trying to hide the storm of feelings that overcame her at the mention of Max's name. The man she had secretly been in love with all these years. From the very day Diana first brought him to a family dinner. Then Cassandra felt this strange, aching feeling in her chest that hadn't gone away since. But she never, by a single word or gesture, betrayed her feelings, neither to her sister, nor especially to him. "Are you insane?" Her voice sounded quiet, but there was steel in it. "This is no longer just deception, Diana. This is betrayal." She finally turned to her sister, and Diana involuntarily recoiled, seeing the pain in her eyes, as turquoise as her own but deeper, more sincere. "I beg you," whispered Diana, grabbing her sister's hands. "This is my only chance. Adrian, he's special. He sees me as an artist, not just a glossy photographer." Cassandra smiled bitterly. "So special that he can't divorce his wife." "You don't understand." Hysterical notes sounded in Diana's voice. "He has business, galleries, contracts. He can't lose everything, but someday." Cassandra closed her eyes. She knew she would agree, as always. Like in childhood when she took the blame for her sister's pranks. Like in college when she finished projects for her. Like later when she gave her best ideas for commercial shoots. "You just need to pretend you're me," Diana said hurriedly. "Max hardly spends any time at home anyway, always busy with his tattoos. And if anything, you'll say you have. Well, your period. He never bothers me during those days." That evening, Cassandra stood before the mirror in Diana and Max's bedroom, examining herself in her sister's designer dress. They were absolutely identical in appearance, but now she felt like a thief. Her stomach twisted with fear and strange anticipation. From below came the sound of an opening door. Max had returned. His heavy footsteps on the stairs echoed in her head like a drumbeat. "God, what am I doing?" she whispered, but it was too late to back out. Max entered the bedroom, pulling off his black t-shirt with his salon's logo as he walked. He smelled of antiseptic, ink, and something ineffably masculine, scents that irritated Diana but somehow made Cassandra's breath catch. "Hi," he said tiredly, not even glancing in her direction. Cassandra mumbled something in response, afraid her voice would betray her. But Max had already disappeared into the bathroom, and a minute later water began running. She stared at the closed bathroom door, and her heart pounded like crazy. This would be the longest night of her life. Chapter 3: Turquoise Paths. Morning greeted Cassandra with sunlight breaking through the partially closed blinds. She woke up at the very edge of the wide bed, where she had spent the whole night, balancing between sleep and reality. Max had already left. She heard him getting ready at dawn, trying not to make noise. Several times during the night, he mumbled something in his sleep. She caught Diana's name and something else indistinct. In such moments, her heart contracted with sharp pain and guilt. Cassandra got up and approached the panoramic window overlooking the bay. Waves rhythmically ran onto the shore, leaving white lace of foam. Max's silver Jeep had disappeared from the parking lot, meaning he had gone to the salon, as he had mumbled before leaving. She slowly surveyed the bedroom, absorbing every detail of her sister's and her husband's life. Photographs on the walls, wedding, vacation, moments of happiness that had now become merely echoes of the past. Max's awards from tattoo conventions in a glass display case. A bottle of Diana's favorite Morning Dew perfume, the same one she herself had helped her sister choose last Christmas. Cassandra knew she shouldn't do it but couldn't resist. She opened the closet, ran her hand over his t-shirts and shirts, inhaled their scent, a mixture of sandalwood and sea breeze. On the vanity table lay Diana's open-day planner. Cassandra skimmed through the pages, filled with her sister's familiar flowing handwriting. The entries ended with yesterday. What would be written on the next page? Spent a magical weekend with my lover while my twin sister entertained my husband. The thought made nausea rise in her throat. Deep down, she understood she should have refused, said no to this insane idea. But had she ever been able to refuse Diana? From childhood, there had been an unspoken rule between them. Diana asks, Cassandra complies. Perhaps because Diana was born 12 minutes earlier and always used this advantage. Or because she was brighter, bolder, more desirable. Cassandra smiled at her thoughts. Even now, finding herself in the home of the man of her dreams, she was thinking not about herself, but about her sister. Her gaze fell on a photograph standing on the bedside table. Max in a black shirt, calm with his trademark half-glance, half-smile raised corner of his lips. She remembered the day when she first saw that smile. Diana had brought him to a family barbecue, introduced him as her new boyfriend. He shook her hand, looked straight into her eyes, and something broke inside. Then she understood the expression love at first sight for the first time. And then she knew she could never tell anyone about it. God, what have I got myself into? She whispered, turning away from the photograph. The penthouse was unusually quiet. This silence pressed on her ears, making her heart beat faster. Each step on the marble floor seemed thunderous. She went down to the kitchen, automatically turned on the coffee machine, exactly like the one she had at home. Took a cup from the cabinet from where Diana kept them. She knew the location of every item in this house, having visited so often. But now everything seemed different, more real, more personal. As if she was seeing this penthouse from the inside for the first time, through the eyes of someone who actually lives here. The sound of an approaching car made her jump. Strange, Max doesn't usually return so early. She hastily set aside her unfinished coffee and looked out the window. His Jeep braked sharply in the parking lot as if the driver was in a hurry. Cassandra saw him jump out of the car and walk quickly toward the building. Something was wrong. She sensed it immediately. There was unusual tension in his movements. "Pack your things," he said at the door, not even taking off his jacket. He was holding some kind of envelope in his hands. "What?" Cassandra froze in confusion at the kitchen doorway. "Take everything you need for a week. Don't forget your swimsuit." His eyes feverishly glistened and some unfamiliar, almost boyish smile played on his lips. "Max, what's happening?" Her voice trembled. She didn't recognize this man. Where was his usual restraint? "No questions, just pack. We have a helicopter in 2 hours." An icy wave of panic washed over her. Helicopter? What helicopter? She needed to call Diana immediately, warn her. But Max was already climbing the stairs, taking a travel bag from the closet as he went. I can't just like that," she began, but he interrupted. "You can, you must. Otherwise, why are we even married?" There was such bitterness in his voice that her heart clenched. The next hour passed as if in a fog. She mechanically packed things, trying to choose what Diana would wear. Her hands trembled as she laid underwear in the bag. Max rushed around the apartment, gathering his things, periodically glancing at his watch. Once he stopped in the bedroom doorway and simply looked at her for several seconds, so that it took her breath away. "You're very beautiful," he said quietly, and vanished again in the whirlwind of preparations. In the taxi on the way to the heliport, she furtively wrote a message to her sister. "Urgent. He's taking me somewhere, flying by helicopter. What should I do?" The answer came almost immediately. "What the hell? You must refuse. Think of any reason." Cassandra closed her eyes. As if it were so simple to refuse the man you love when he looks at you with such hope for the first time in a long while. Even if he's looking not at you, but at your reflection. In the helicopter, Max took her hand for the first time during this crazy day. His palm was warm and slightly rough from constant work with instruments. "You know," he said, looking out the window at mountain ridges passing below, "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what's happening to our marriage." Cassandra held her breath. "The last few months, they've been difficult. We seem to have lost something important. You've distanced yourself from me, and I didn't understand why." He turned to her, and in his eyes she saw such sincerity, such pain, that she wanted to burst into tears. "I decided we need to start over," he continued. "Remember our honeymoon in Big Sur, how happy we were then. I thought maybe if we go back there, if we spend this week together, just you and me, without phones, without work, without all this." He took the envelope he had been holding that morning from his pocket. Inside were vouchers to an exclusive spa hotel in the Big Sur Nature Reserve, the same one where he and Diana had spent their honeymoon. Cassandra felt nausea rising in her throat. Diana had told her about their honeymoon, how they walked through the ancient forest, how they made love under the starry sky, how they made plans for the future. Now Max wanted to recreate those moments, to bring back that happiness. But with whom? With the woman who had betrayed him and was now in another man's arms? Or with her, an imposter who had stolen someone else's life? "I know it's crazy taking off like this," Max chuckled nervously. "But I think sometimes you need to do crazy things to save what really matters. Our marriage matters to me. You matter to me." Each of his words was like a stab to the heart. Cassandra looked out the window, trying to hold back tears. Down below, majestic mountains covered in emerald forests stretched out, like scenery for a play in which she was playing the lead role in someone else's script. The phone in her bag vibrated, undoubtedly another angry message from Diana. But Cassandra didn't check. Instead, she turned to Max and smiled weakly. "Yes, our marriage matters." She spoke these words, and they hung in the air like a sentence. Whose marriage? Hers or Diana's? At that moment, Cassandra realized she had crossed a line beyond which there would be no return to her previous life. And the scariest thing was that somewhere deep inside, she was glad of it. Chapter 4: Parallel Lifelines. Adrian Calloway's art residence towered over the mountain valley like a futuristic spaceship that had landed among ancient pines. The minimalist building of glass and concrete, designed by a famous Japanese architect, seemed both a continuation of the surrounding landscape and its bold negation. Diana stood on the terrace with its glass floor, sipping champagne from a crystal flute and half listening as Adrian discoursed on color dissonances and new trends in abstract expressionism. "What are you thinking about, my muse?" Adrian came up behind her, embracing her waist. He emanated the aroma of expensive cologne and acrylic paints. "Oh, nothing." She turned to him with a practiced smile. After all, wasn't this what she had dreamed of? A luxurious art residence, a famous artist, a world of art and beauty. The phone in her purse stubbornly remained silent, and this silence somehow troubled her more than any news would have. At the same time, in the Big Sur Mountains, Cassandra and Max were entering the territory of the Redwood Haven Eco Hotel. Ancient sequoias along the driveway rose 100 meters high, creating the feeling of entering a fairy tale kingdom. "Just like then, remember?" Max smiled, looking at her with such warmth that Cassandra's breath caught. No, she didn't remember. She hadn't been here 5 years ago, but she nodded, trying to smile back. Their chalet turned out to be a spacious bungalow built around a living tree, the trunk of which passed through the center of the room. A bed made of untreated wood with snow-white eco-friendly bedding, a terrace overlooking a mountain valley, a bathroom with a panoramic view of the forest. "I'll take a shower, then shall we go for a walk? Or maybe you'll join me like back then," suggested Max, dropping his travel bag on the floor. Cassandra nodded, unable to say a word. Before following him into the bathroom, she quickly checked her phone. 20 missed calls from Diana, 7 voice messages. She deleted them without listening. Meanwhile, at Adrian's art residence, time flowed differently. After an impromptu photo shoot where Diana posed nude among unfinished canvases, they moved to the main studio. Diana lay on a huge bed covered with red silk sheets, Adrian's favorite shade for his new series of works. She watched as he mixed paints on an enormous palette, occasionally casting a studying glance at her. "Come to me," she purred, extending her arms. "My goddess," Adrian set aside his brushes and lay down beside her. His movements were measured, deliberate, as if he were performing another performance for an invisible audience. How unlike Max's almost stern tenderness. Stop. Why was she thinking about her husband now? Diana forced herself to focus on the present moment. On the cool silk sheets, on Adrian's elegant hands, on the scent of his expensive cologne. The mountain wind quietly rustled in the tops of the sequoias when Cassandra stepped onto the terrace of their chalet. The setting sun painted the sky in incredible shades of orange and purple. Max appeared next in simple jeans and a t-shirt with an abstract print, his hair still damp from the shower. "I can't believe we're here," he said, standing next to her at the railing. Their shoulders touched, and an electric spark ran through Cassandra's body. "Neither can I," she whispered, and it was the absolute truth. The first days in Big Sur flew by like a dream. Cassandra had never thought she could be so happy. She and Max woke at dawn, greeted the sun among ancient sequoias, walked mountain trails. He taught her the basics of rock climbing, patiently belaying her while she tried to find the next hold. His hands were strong and gentle at the same time, and each touch resonated in her like an electrical discharge. In the evenings, they sat by the fire looking at the stars, incredibly bright away from city lights. Max told stories from his past, stories she was sure even Diana had never heard. About years of service in hot spots, about how tattoos saved him from post-traumatic stress disorder, about moments when he was on the brink of death, about how he learned to value each day lived. Cassandra listened, holding her breath, and with each word fell in love with him more deeply. She tried to memorize every detail, how the forest wind ruffled his dark hair, how wrinkles gathered at the corners of his eyes when he smiled, how his deep laughter sounded, echoing off mountain slopes. For the first time in a long while, Max seemed truly alive and happy. "You know," he said one evening as they sat in the hotel restaurant, "I feel like I'm falling in love with you all over again. You've become so different, more real, more open. I think I feel much more than back then during our honeymoon. Do you?" Meanwhile, at Adrian's art residence, time passed quite differently. After another session of artistic love, as he called it, Diana lazily examined her photographs, which he projected onto the wall as inspiration for future works. "I can't believe how easily it all worked out," she smirked, taking a sip of champagne. "My husband is such a simpleton, didn't even notice the substitution. It's even a bit offensive, you know, as if I've become part of the furniture for him." "Really?" Adrian raised an eyebrow with feigned interest. He had already heard this story several times. Diana clearly enjoyed her cunning. "Oh yes," she took a sip of champagne. "But my sister Cassandra, she's a real find. So proper, always ready to help cover. Can you imagine, we'll even be able to use her in the future, when your wife leaves again?" Adrian nodded absently, examining the play of light in his glass. His thoughts were far away, about the upcoming exhibition in Berlin, about a new technique of mixing paints he was developing, about how to more adroitly end this affair with a beautiful but tiresomely superficial lover. Veronica would never know about this fling. She was too busy with her galleries and charity projects. And Diana? Well, she got what she wanted, a few days in the world of art and the illusion of a deep relationship. But that would be all. "Darling," he interrupted her monologue about her husband's stupidity, "don't you think we shouldn't talk so much about him? Let's better." He didn't finish the phrase, leaning toward her. Diana eagerly responded, but somewhere deep inside her, a strange feeling stirred, either guilt or anxiety. She brushed it away like an annoying gnat. After all, she deserved this life filled with art, didn't she? In the Big Sur Mountains, days gave way to nights filled with magic. One evening, Max organized a dinner on an observation deck, a table for two, candles, wine, and an ocean of stars overhead. Cassandra couldn't take her eyes off him. In the candlelight, his face looked especially beautiful, features softened, and golden reflections danced in his eyes. He talked about his tattoos, about the meanings he put into each drawing, and such genuine passion sounded in his voice that it took her breath away. "You know," he said, covering her hand with his, "I never told you why I love what I do so much." Cassandra shook her head, afraid to break the moment with words. "There's soul in tattoos, history. Each line, each stroke, it's part of a person, their path. When I work, I'm not just drawing on skin. I'm helping people tell their story, express what's inside." He paused, looking at the stars. "Like our relationship, it's special too, and worth saving." In their chalet, twilight reigned, only moonlight penetrating through the panoramic windows. Max pulled her close. Cassandra felt her heart ready to jump out of her chest. All thoughts that this was wrong, that she had no right, dissolved in the warmth of his touch. That night they rediscovered each other. Cassandra gave herself to him with all her soul, not playing a role, being her true self for the first time in these days. Meanwhile, at Adrian's art residence, Diana scrolled through photos on her phone while the artist slept, sprawled on red sheets. Here she was with Max on their wedding day, so young, happy. Here was their first shared home. Max outside his salon on opening day, proud, surrounded by friends and first clients, with the broad smile of a man who had realized his dream. She tried to convince herself she had made the right choice. That Adrian, his art, his position in the world of elite culture, this was what she had always wanted. Why then couldn't she shake the feeling that she was making a huge mistake? Finally, she set aside the phone and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere there in the Big Sur Mountains, her sister was playing the role of an exemplary wife. I hope she hasn't gotten too carried away, thought Diana with a sudden pang of jealousy. She had always known about Cassandra's feelings for Max, though they never spoke about it out loud. Adrian stirred in his sleep, his hand possessively settling on her hip. Diana distastefully freed herself from his embrace and went out to the terrace. The night air was filled with the aroma of pine and wildflowers, but for some reason she suddenly desperately wanted to smell the familiar scent of ink and antiseptic that Max always carried when returning from his salon. Chapter 5: Torn Canvas. Their days in the mountains flowed peacefully and happily until chance destroyed this idyll. Max was returning from a morning run, wanted to get back before Cassandra woke up and prepare breakfast. He had almost reached the chalet when he heard his wife's voice coming from the terrace. She was talking on the phone, and in her voice were unfamiliar intonations, softer, more uncertain, quite unlike Diana's tone. "I can't do this anymore," she was saying. "It's wrong. He's so amazing. Every time he touches me, calls me by your name, I feel like the worst traitor." Max froze, not believing his ears. "No, Diana, you don't understand. This isn't a game anymore. I'm in love with him for real. I've always been in love from the first day you introduced us." The blood drained from his face. "Diana," she's talking to Diana. His hand slowly slipped from the door handle. The woman on the terrace, her voice trembling with suppressed tears, continued. "Yes, I know it was your idea to substitute for you while you have fun with your artist, but I can't pretend anymore. It's killing me." The world around Max tilted and swam. The puzzle that had been bothering him all these days suddenly came together. That's why she seemed different, more sincere, more sensitively feeling. That's why her kisses were so uncertain and her touches so reverent. It wasn't his wife. It was her twin sister, Cassandra, and Diana all this time. He leaned against a sequoia trunk, feeling a wave of icy rage rising inside. Years of military training had taught him to control emotions, but now it was difficult. Fragments of memories flashed through his mind. How Diana had become increasingly detached, her constant excuses, secret phone conversations. And Cassandra, quiet, deep Cassandra, who had always looked at him in a special way, but he had never given it any significance. "All right," her voice, now more resolute, reached him. "I understand that after the vacation everything should return to its places. You'll return to your husband and I'll just disappear from his life as if nothing happened. But know this, what you're doing to him is cruel. He doesn't deserve such betrayal." The plan formed instantly. Combat experience hadn't been in vain. Max could act quickly and effectively when the situation required it. He waited until Cassandra finished the conversation, then entered the chalet as if nothing had happened. "Honey," he said, trying to make his voice sound natural, "I need to return to the city urgently for a couple of days. Received an urgent order from an important client that I can't postpone." He saw how her face paled, how her hands trembled, but she only nodded. "Of course I understand, but what about—" "You'll stay here," he interrupted. "It's only for a couple of days. Enjoy the spa, walks, whatever you want. I'll be back soon." He kissed her on the forehead, and his heart clenched at how she leaned into this touch. 4 hours later, he was already in Laguna Beach, parking his Jeep near the office of a former comrade who now worked for a private security firm. Taking out his phone, Max opened his contact list. Among them was one who could help him, a man whose life he once saved in the deserts of the Middle East. A couple of calls, and he had all the information about Adrian Calloway, including coordinates of his art residence and security system data. He was particularly interested in one detail, a private helipad on the residence grounds, which Adrian used for his movements. 15 minutes for approach and landing, quite sufficient for what he had in mind. Max rented a helicopter and pilot who had served with him in the same unit. Taking off above the ocean, they set course for the Santa Monica Mountains. Max sat by the window, turning an old lighter in his hands, the only thing left from his father. He remembered their last conversation when his father said, "Son, there's only one truly valuable thing in life, loyalty. Lose it, lose everything." Then, as a 20-year-old youngster, he hadn't given these words much importance. Now, approaching the place where his wife was cheating on him with another man, he understood their true meaning. 2 minutes to target. The pilot's voice in the headphones brought him back to reality. Ahead appeared a modern structure, as if overlaid on the mountain landscape with a sharp brush stroke, Adrian's art residence. The helicopter landed precisely on the marked pad. The guard who ran out to meet them didn't even have time to utter the standard greeting phrase. A skillful blow from Max sent him into a deep sleep. Donning his jacket with the security agency logo, Max walked quickly toward the main building. The security system was impressive, but not for a man with his training. 3 minutes after landing, he already stood before the door of the main studio, from behind which came muffled voices. Diana was saying something, her tone gentle, cooing, the way she hadn't spoken to him in a long time. Max didn't knock. With a sharp movement, he flung open the door and entered the spacious room, flooded with natural light from panoramic windows. Diana and Adrian stood by a huge canvas depicting a nude female figure, Diana herself, captured in a moment of ecstasy. She turned at the sound of the opening door, and her face contorted with horror when she recognized her husband. "Max!" Her scream echoed off the high ceilings of the studio. Adrian, who until then had been holding her by the waist, stepped back, instinctively shielding himself with an easel. "What the hell?" he began, but faltered upon meeting Max's gaze. "Good afternoon." Max's voice was calm, almost friendly. He took 2 sheets of paper from the inside pocket of his jacket. "I have 2 documents for you to sign. In the first, consent to divorce, where you, Diana, waive any claims to joint property. In the second, your obligation, Adrian, to divorce your wife and marry my unfaithful spouse." "You're insane." Adrian tried to feign indignation, but the fear in his eyes betrayed his true feelings. "I'm married, I have galleries, a reputation." "Which are registered in your wife's name, I know," Max interrupted him. "That's why the second document is especially important. Since you love each other so much, it would be fair to make everything official." "Max, listen to me," Diana began, but he cut her off. "Either you sign the papers or I slightly transform these masterpieces." He took out a small can of flammable liquid and a lighter from his pocket. "Insurance will cover the damage, of course, but how many years of work and reputation will be lost?" He spoke so matter-of-factly, as if discussing weekend weather. Diana burst into tears, smearing her expensive makeup. Adrian, pale as a sheet, took the pen with trembling hands. "You wouldn't dare," Diana whispered. Max smiled, cold and frightening. 10 years in special forces, dear. And believe me, I have nothing to lose right now. Unlike your friend who has plenty to lose, paintings, reputation, galleries." They signed. First Adrian, his signature was illegible like a child's drawing. Then Diana, she was crying so hard she could barely hold the pen. Max carefully took the documents and put them in his inside pocket. "Well, it was nice to meet you," he said to Adrian with icy politeness, then turned to Diana. "You can keep the ring. As a memento, just think, was this affair worth losing everything?" "Max, please," Diana sobbed, but he had already closed the door behind him. A minute later, the helicopter rose into the air, carrying him away from the place where the last illusions of his marriage had been destroyed. The pilot silently steered the machine, asking no questions. For this, Max valued his old brothers in arms. Halfway through, he turned and said just one phrase. "To Big Sur." Max nodded, watching the mountain ridges passing below. "To Big Sur. I have a date there with true love." Chapter 6. True Colors of Love. Golden rays of the setting sun colored the tops of the sequoias in warm tones when the helicopter descended onto the pad near the Redwood Haven Hotel. Cassandra stood on the terrace of their chalet, looking at the majestic mountains. In the rays of the setting sun, her silhouette seemed fragile and lonely. She didn't hear Max enter, was too immersed in contemplating nature. The last 2 days she had hardly slept, torturing herself with thoughts of the upcoming separation. Tomorrow it was all supposed to end. Tomorrow the fairy tale would turn into a pumpkin, and she would again become just a twin sister who had made an unforgivable mistake by falling in love with her sister's husband. "I'm back," he said quietly, and she jumped, turning sharply. Something like pain flashed across her face, immediately replaced by an attempt at a smile. How did it go?" Her voice trembled slightly. Max looked at her and his heart contracted with tenderness. How could he not have noticed before this special depth in her eyes, this sincerity in every gesture? "Everything's fine," he replied, coming closer. "I ordered dinner at the observation deck, where we were on the first evening, remember?" She nodded, though they both knew for her that evening was the first, and for him, merely an attempt to recreate the past with another woman. His hands fell on her shoulders, and she involuntarily leaned back, pressing against his chest. Max felt her trembling like an autumn leaf in the wind. The table was set at the edge of a cliff, offering a breathtaking view of the valley. Candles flickered in glass lanterns, creating a magical atmosphere. The sound of a mountain river somewhere below provided the perfect music for their dinner. Cassandra sat down, smoothing the folds of her light summer dress, as turquoise as the water in the mountain lake at the foot of the ridge. In her movements was a kind of doom, as if she were preparing for a farewell evening. Max watched her, noticing every detail. How she nervously fidgeted with her napkin, how she avoided looking him in the eyes, how she bit her lower lip, trying to contain her emotions. "You know," he said, filling their glasses with red wine, "these days have been the happiest of my life." Cassandra raised her gaze to him, full of pain and despair. "Don't," she whispered. "Please don't make this even harder." A tear rolled down her cheek and she hastily wiped it away. "Tomorrow it all ends, and it would be better if we just—" "What ends?" he asked gently, taking a small velvet box from his pocket. "Are you talking about Diana returning to take her place?" Cassandra froze, her eyes widening with horror. You know everything." Her voice was barely audible over the noise of the mountain river. Max slowly opened the velvet box. Inside sparkled a ring with a small emerald, simple and elegant, nothing like the massive, diamond-studded ring he had once given Diana. "I know," he said softly. "And I know that I've fallen in love with you, Cassandra. Not with the mask you've been wearing these days, but with the real you." She looked at him with wide eyes, unable to believe what was happening. But how? When? Her hands trembled so much that she spilled wine. "I heard your conversation with your sister," he confessed. "That's why I flew away. I needed to take care of some formalities back in the city." Max rose from the table and knelt on the wooden deck of the observation platform. The sun was setting beyond the horizon, painting the world in golden pink tones. Birds sang their evening song, creating the perfect musical accompaniment for this moment. "Cassandra," his voice was firm and confident, "will you marry me?" "But you're married," she whispered in confusion and immediately faltered, realizing the absurdity of her words. Max smiled gently. "Both yes and no, my love. I am married to your sister, was." He took folded papers from his pocket. "Here's a divorce petition signed by Diana. She's no longer my wife. And I want my wife to be you, the only woman who truly loves me and whom I truly love." Cassandra stared at the documents, unable to utter a word. The events of recent days flashed through her mind like frames of a surrealistic film. Their first night, when she was afraid to move in bed. Their walks on mountain trails where each touch resonated with an electric discharge, moments when she forgot about her role and was simply herself, and saw how his gaze warmed in response. "You really knew," she whispered, "and still stayed with me all these days." Max took her hand in his. "Every moment with you was real, Cassandra. Every word, every look, every touch. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly alive. And I want to live the rest of my life that way with you, the real you." Tears flowed down her cheeks, but now they were tears of happiness. She looked at the ring, shimmering in the rays of the setting sun, and couldn't believe this was really happening. Her entire being was filled with such boundless love that it seemed her heart would burst from the overwhelming emotions. "Yes," she whispered, and this short word seemed to free her from all the fears and doubts of recent days. "Yes, yes, yes." She threw her arms around his neck and he caught her, spinning her above the wooden deck. Her laughter mingled with the cries of birds, and her kiss tasted sweet from tears and wine. They talked all night, sitting by the fireplace in their chalet and watching the flames dance among the logs. Cassandra told him everything, how she fell in love with him at first sight, how she suffered all these years seeing him with her sister, how she agreed to this crazy substitution because it was her only chance to be with him, even pretending to be someone else. Max listened, holding her hand tightly, thinking about how blind he had been all these years. Their return to Laguna Beach was triumphant. They married a month later, an intimate ceremony on the beach, only the closest friends. Diana didn't come. She had indeed married Adrian, who lost a large part of his art business after a scandalous divorce from Veronica. They say his paintings stopped selling, and now he earns a living giving painting lessons at the local community center. Diana takes photographs for tourist brochures. Her career as a glossy photographer abruptly ended after influential clients learned about the circumstances of her new marriage. But that's a completely different story. And a few months after the wedding, Cassandra gave Max a special gift. She waited until he returned from the salon, tired but satisfied, having completed a complex hours-long work on a client's back. The salon smelled of antiseptic and ink, a scent she now loved because it reminded her of her husband. "Beloved," she said, handing him a small package wrapped in handmade paper decorated with watercolor, "I have news for you. Our days in Big Sur didn't remain without consequences." Inside was her drawing, a silhouette of a woman with a rounded belly against a backdrop of mountains and a note. "Daddy, I'll appear in 7 months. I hope you'll draw the most beautiful tattoo for me when I grow up." Max froze, unable to tear his gaze from the drawing. Then he raised his eyes to his wife, and she saw so much love and happiness in them that it took her breath away. He pulled her close, carefully, as if she were made of the finest porcelain, and whispered, "Thank you for being you, for never pretending again, for giving me true love." Cassandra pressed against his chest, inhaling the familiar scent of ink and antiseptic, and thought about how sometimes the biggest mistakes in our lives can lead to the greatest happiness. You just need enough courage to admit your feelings and enough strength to fight for your love. Their hands intertwined, like the patterns of tattoos on Max's skin, complex, unique designs of fate that sometimes lead us exactly where we should be, even if the path seems tangled and confusing. After all, a great master always sees the final drawing long before the first lines fall on a clean canvas.